Alright guys, this is Unit 11.4, Imperialism in Asia. This is going to be super quick, super fast. I don't have a lot of time to do the podcast, and there's really not a whole lot here. Again, your book is going to go into much more detail with this section, so make sure you check that out. But we're just going to lightly glaze over some things happening in China, India, and Japan in terms of European imperialism during the 19th century. I'm joined today by my dog, Piper. She is here. Piper, what are you doing? Piper. She is over by the couch, and she does not care about us. So I guess we will continue on with this podcast, and Piper will judge us from afar. So, first up, we've got some opium wars in China. So let me set the deal for you. China has a rich history. Take AP World History and learn about that. But China has a lot of stuff going on in its past. But eventually, Britain is going to come to a position where it is trading a lot with China. Well, here's the deal. The British love Chinese goods. Okay, they get some spices, some herbs, some silks, some cool stuff like that. But on the other side, China doesn't really buy a lot from England. So it's a one-way street. All the wealth in Britain is stacking up in China, and China is self-sufficient. So, like, we don't need your stuff. Just give us your money. So the situation is that Britain needed to find something that the Chinese would need or would want to a great degree. So here's what they do. This is actually very clever. They take poppy plants and develop opium from it. And now they sell opium to the Chinese people. Well, the Chinese are all about some opium, right? It's kind of a derivative of heroin. It's good stuff, right? I did not officially endorse drug use. Let's just go ahead and make that clear. However, the Chinese loved it. But the thing with opium is that it made them incredibly lazy. They sat around like these guys right here, and whoop, there went the screen. Let's move that back. They sat around like these guys, and they just smoked opium all day. So basically, the Chinese are doing nothing. Their work ethic is terrible. Life sucks in China. It's not very good. So the Chinese government understands that they need to make a change. They need to make sure, get this opium out so that people start working again. So at around 1838, 20,000 chests of opium were destroyed by the Chinese. This is like the new Boston Tea Party, unless it's like the China Opium Party or something. But they destroy the opium. Well, these are British goods, so it doesn't matter if it's opium or Raggedy Ann dolls or Care Bears or whatever. I mean, if it's a British good, they're going to be upset that it's being destroyed. So the British obviously declare war on China, and at this point in time, it is no contest. Britain's going to win easily. This actually happens again about 15 years later, 1856 to 1860, and both times Britain slams the Chinese pretty good. And in 1842, you have the Treaty of Nanking, which gave Hong Kong to Britain, and Britain actually had Hong Kong until 1997, which, you know, was just, 17 years ago. That's not very long ago. And the Treaty of Nanking also gave some ports to Britain that they kept. In the treaty, it said forever. And there were other deals in there and other terms, but nothing really too lasting. So anyway, the point here is China tried to help its advantage in trade, and the British got some drugs for them so that they buy some of their stuff, and they bought the stuff, and everyone got drugged up, and then there was a war, and Britain won. And I would say it's hard to win a war when you're on drugs anyway, unless it's a war on drugs. Well, then I guess you would lose that too. So, whatever. Opium wars, kind of interesting. Okay, next up we have the Taiping Rebellion. I'm currently fighting with Piper here. She has come over to my side, and she's trying to bite my hand off, so just, pray for me in this moment that she doesn't, and I have a hand later on in life. Anyway, Taiping Rebellion. Chinese upset with the British, basically. The British are coming in and taking all their stuff. They're very upset. So there's a large rebellion that lasts actually for about 14 to 15 years. This is a crazy number. As many as 20 million people perish. 20 million! It's like 2 Holocausts. That's incredible. Citizens, army, even British troops in there. 20 million people die in the rebellion. Kind of an interesting tidbit with this. is the leader of the rebellion thought he was the brother of Jesus. So, yeah. Okay, anyway, 14 years pass. Taiping Rebellion. Again, Britain puts down China. The years go by. And other countries start to get involved in China and open what's known as spheres of influence. Basically, that term, and that is a pet, that term is given to illustrate that you have a circle of influence. You have a circle of an area, if you will, in which you have influence. You have a say in what's going on. And most countries in Europe had their own sphere of influence in eastern China. You know, Britain, France, Russia was in there. Germany got involved. Even Japan, who we're going to talk about a little bit here in a minute, wanted a part of the Chinese market, and they all had their little influence in there as well. In fact, Japan and China fought a little war called the Sino-Japanese War in 1894, which Japan whooped up on China, showing that China really has no chance against these imperial powers. Well, later that decade, around the year 1899, the United States wants to be a part of this Chinese market. And the United States demands that China is an open door, that wherever your sphere of influence is, no other country would try to shut that door on you, meaning that they wouldn't try to harm you or to cut your influence there. For some reason, all the other countries agreed. They were like, okay, whatever, that's fine. USA, quit annoying us. And basically, everybody and their mother has access to the Chinese markets. Britain, France, Russia, Germany, Japan, the United States, whoever, Djibouti, whoever wants else to get in there and get a part of that. But really, this is a liberal move, is it not? I mean, it's free trade for all. Granted, the Chinese really don't have a say, but this is a very liberal idea to be able to have, uncontested trade in a far eastern part of the world. And here's just a little cartoon that's pretty famous that shows that Uncle Sam, out of nowhere, now has the keys to the door of China. And you see a very happy Chinese man back here who's waiting to trade with all these European powers. Let's see, who do we got here? This is old Germany right here, looks like. That's England. They're usually fat. I don't know who that guy is. Maybe Bismarck, who knows? Bismarck's gone by this point, so probably not. Russia, and these guys. France, that's France. Oh, Old Man, and Happy Guard, and the Tree of Life. So, yeah, that's China. It's exciting. Hello, Piper. Piper is now trying to climb up in my lap and lick my face. Piper, would you like to say anything about the open door policy? No? If I could get her to speak, I would, but she's not that smart. So, but we love her so much. Oh, she just licked me. Oh, again. Okay, now let's stop. Let's stop that. We got here. Here's another illustration. Each country fighting over China here. See, Japan is the nice cat down here. Here's Russia. England, usually shown by a lion. France is the rooster/chicken. Germany, the terrifying vulture, or whatever. Scary dog. Two-headed bird. Austria-Hungary, probably two-headed. And, oh yes, red, white, and blue, baby, up there in the corner. Looking all important and stately. So, again, it's all these countries trying to get in on the Chinese fun. So, let's talk a little bit about India. India is known as the jewel of the crown. And it is by far England's most important colony. Not only because of the raw materials it collects there, but there are a lot of people who live in India. And unlike China, the British have India all to itself. So it's a huge market where they can make the Indians buy their goods. And actually for the longest time until 1857, India was not directly controlled by the British government. They were controlled by the British East India Company, even as far back as the early 17th century. So, again, it's like a company that controls a colony. It's like Walmart if it had its own colony, or if Apple had its own orchard, or whatever. But this is known, again, as the jewel of the crown. So anything that happens in India to disrupt production or live, the British are going to be upset about it. And that leads us to a very critical event called the Sepoy Mutiny. And the Sepoy Mutiny is a pet, so you need to make sure and understand what it is. I just don't have it in red. But basically what Sepoys are Indians who serve as British soldiers. Another important thing to know about them is that these soldiers are either Hindu or they are Muslim. At this point, it doesn't really matter which is which, but again, they're either Hindu or Muslim. And for a long time, these soldiers had felt a lot of pressure from the Christian missionaries in India that they were being forced to convert if they're going to serve in Your Majesty's brigade and to, in essence, work for England, that you're going to have to be Christian. Most specifically Anglican, but there had been a lot of, unspoken pressure against them. And then in about 1855, a new cartridge was introduced in which they would have to, it's a military tool that they would have to deal with. And the cartridge was like the part where you bite off to be able to load it into the gun. The cartridge was made of either pork or beef fat. Now you're like, ooh, that would taste good, right? Pork fat. Well, here's the problem. Hindus and Muslims, Hindus, the cow is sacred. Okay? So, you don't touch cattle. Okay? And the idea that you're eating a part of a cow to do your job, that's just abhorrent. You don't do that. If you're Muslim, a pig is considered unclean. So, either way, you had two different types, pork or beef, but, whatever. They're going to see a lot of hesitancy in using that equipment. So that triggers this massive revolt of soldiers in which the British Army puts it down quite easily. But in any case, the big thing that happened, and this is really the major thing, the causes is just kind of interesting, but the result is what you need to know. India is now going to be ruled directly by the British government. Before this, it was the British East India Company. Now it's going to be the British government that's going to lead India directly. And that's going to be the way it is for about 90 years after the fact. Now, what's also interesting is that the British also are going to clamp down on culture in India. Two things which were outlawed culturally in India after this takeover. One, child marriage. Big, common, outlawed by the British. They don't see it as legitimate. Second, there was this thing, a procedure is called the sati. Say you're a wife of a man and the man dies, and the Hindus cremate their dead. They don't bury him, they cremate him. So they're going to cremate your husband, and they're going to make the funeral pyre, the pyre of wood, and they're going to burn him, and it's going to be in this kind of a ceremony in front of everyone. Well, there was a tradition that the widowed wife would throw herself into the fire as her husband the dead body was burning, and that she would sacrifice herself and go into the afterlife, and in the Hindu tradition be reincarnated, and that goes on and on from there. But in any case, the British forbid that practice. Okay, they forbid the practice. They say that no, you can't do that. So again, the Indians, okay, not Native Americans, but the Indians are seeing that their culture is now under attack. Not only their government, but their culture as well. And a lot of this had to do with the Sepoy mutiny. Final thing, just real quick, Japan. We've already mentioned this a little bit, but the Russo-Japanese War. Japan is a growing power in East Asia. We saw, as I discussed there, they defeated China in a war, a Sino-Japanese war in 1894. Well, 10 years later, they get into a war with Russia over Manchuria, which is northern China today, and Korea. Both countries were looking to expand to those areas, and the Russians are like, it's the Japanese, what do they got? They had more than they had. Japan whoops Russia in this war, causing lots of embarrassment and crisis at home. Remember, the revolution in 1905, Bloody Sunday, was caused in part of this debacle. I think also of interest is that this treaty was mediated in the United States between Russia and Japan, and Teddy Roosevelt was in the middle of the action and won the Nobel Peace Prize. Kind of awesome, because if you know Teddy Roosevelt's personality, he'd be the last one you expect to win the Nobel Peace Prize, but there you go. That's life. So that's imperialism in Asia. There's a lot more to it that I didn't go over. For example, like France getting involved in Southeast Asia, Germany doing some things, Spanish-American War where the U.S. defeats Spain and takes the Philippines and Hawaii and Guam. But we're just going to kind of leave that alone because we got stuff to do and Piper is getting annoying, so I'm going to have to take her outside to poop. So, again, this is 11.4. I hope you got some good notes on it. Make sure to read the book. And then our test is coming up here pretty soon. Combined test on Unit 10 and 11. So make sure that you start preparing for that. And you have an excellent night or morning or SSR period whenever you are listening to this here podcast. We'll see you later.